Hey folks, Ori here. Hope you're all well and having a good week wherever you are, or weekend. This video, pretty much as the thumbnail suggests, is my reaction and speculation, or well, thoughts, on the 9.2 announcement. Obviously, a lot of people are doing this at the moment, but I kind of want to put my thoughts out there and where I see things going. We are going to break it down into the various segments, so we're going to be discussing kind of the new zone, meeting the Enlightened, which is going to be obviously the new faction that we deal with, decoding the Cypher, which the Cypher is probably a big thing that I want to focus here, and a fair bit of speculation that I've got based on the image that they've provided for it. Probably have a brief discussion on the raid of the first one, or the Sepulcher, so the new raid that's been announced, and we're also going to discuss tier sets along with a couple of other features. The big part of this as well is to take it all with a pinch of salt. Things can change. This is a very, very early announcement, and I think that this has been done because we're going to see the PTR in a couple of weeks. So bear with me while we go through this, and I would also like to caveat and apologize if this video seems a little bit disjointed in places, because as I alluded to earlier this week, I am going to try and video edit this to remove some of the gaps and generally improve how the video feels, so less of a ad hoc and winging it video and more of a professional kind of meshed thing. So hopefully you guys enjoy this, and I will continue to work on it. But in the meantime, let's get into it. On to the first part then. Let's discuss the new zone itself, Zerith Mortis, because let's face it, when you get a new patch, the first thing you want to know is where I'm going and why am I going there. The why we're going there is obviously we're now following the Jailer after the culmination of 9.1 and the tier with him having acquired the seal from the Arbiter. So the little blue part of the patch note and the zone description of Zerith Mortis reads as follows. Zerith Mortis was created by the first ones, and it's intended to create afterlives. Its denizens, the Automa, have created all that exists in the Shadowlands, Azeroth, and the realms beyond. It is a strange alien location that defies all concepts of reality or physics. The Jailer intends to use Zerith Mortis' power to reshape everything according to his design. And that is the part that gives weight and leads to the name, Eternity's End. Now, that small couple of sentences for Zerith Mortis, I feel don't really do it justice, because the artwork reveal and the scenery for Zerith Mortis shows a lot more, and it is the dichotomy of life and death itself. Now, there's a few bits that are definitely worth kind of keying in on, and that is defying all concepts of reality or physics. Now, obviously within a game, there are limitations to this. However, the video for the announcement itself was pretty good in showing this. This is just over 3 minutes into the premiere, or the developer premiere of the patch. And you can see the creatures are walking over the water. If I actually back it up slightly to 3 minutes. There. So this water we can walk over, as other creatures will. However, that little bit underneath, if we go back to 305 and pause it for a second, there's speculation within Calamity, and I kind of believe it myself thinking about it, that there may come a point within our ciphers, which we'll discuss shortly, that may mean that we can, rather than walking over the top of it, we can go under it. Now, because in the developer's preview they talk about a more primordial world underneath the water, it kind of made me think, the more I was watching the video and thinking about doing this video, that it'd be very much like the scene in At World's End where they flip the Black Pearl. Are we potentially going to see an up is down situation should we go under the water? So we see more the primordial building blocks of the world, what the progenitors had to play with when they started creating these things. Aside from that, the other artwork for the zone shows that we are going to go from lush, green, vibrant biospheres to acrid deserts, which may lead us to some explanation as to why, going through places like Azeroth, we see that the Titans and the older civilizations of Azeroth can be found in both acrid desert, like Uldum, and the architecture of, say, Nyalotha, to why we have areas like Ionars or Sholazar Basin, Ungoro Crater, to name a few. So hopefully we will find a lot of answers in Zerith Mortis, and not just answers related to our decryption of the ancient language and the use around the Cypher of the first ones. Now, we've discussed where we're going, who's going to be there. So this is where in the patch notes it talks about meeting the Enlightened, and the synopsis, or a brief introduction we have of them through the patch note, is: the Enlightened are brokers that arrived in Zerith Mortis a long time ago. They no longer see their world in a transactional manner, but instead they treat their dwelling as a sacred place and hope to answer to a higher calling, the pursuit of knowledge. Find common ground with the Enlightened to succeed and defend Zerith Mortis. Now, that kind of says everything you need to know about these people, and paired with the artwork that they have, which, I'll be honest, the concept artwork for them makes them look cool as all hell in my opinion. I really like these armor sets. Unfortunately, I can't really see them ever giving it to us as an ensemble, despite the fact that, like, the one for leather would look great on a rogue, specifically an undead rogue, in my opinion. Or maybe even the warrior-esque looking plate over there. But you never know. I might be pleasantly surprised. Might be a rep option. Once you've translated so much and contributed so much to their knowledge and their information. These are also going to feed quite strongly into the Cypher, because I believe we work very, very closely with one rather eccentric Enlightened, if I remember correctly from the video. So, something to look forward to. Again, kind of calamity speculation more than anything else. Is I believe it was Stitch that raised this point up rather interestingly. The Enlightened may or may not be connected with Venari, because as those of you that have potentially paid attention with Venari, she has betrayed the other brokers in some way, shape or form, and we don't really know how or why. And because these Enlightened lead such a vastly different lifestyle to traditional brokers, as we have met them so far, this may help to explain a little bit about Venari's past, which would be a neat thing to know. Because one of the big problems with 9.2 that I see with it anyway, is I feel like we may see a lot of loose ends left to the expansion, much like Warlords of Draenor. There are a lot of story arcs that could have been and were supposed to be, but kind of got brushed under the rug. Hopefully, though, with the Enlightened and their pursuit of knowledge, pursuit of a higher cause with a less materialistic lifestyle, we might see a more answers than questions, to put it that way. But until we learn more about the Enlightened, there's not really much we can talk about, especially in terms of things like rewards and how their reputation's actually going to work. Like, are we going to gain reputation based off how we decode the Cypher and how much we contribute to that? Or is it going to be a case like Venari, where you do so many tasks a week and there's kind of a pseudo time gating to it? So, not too much to say really in terms of the Enlightened. And now we get to talk about the bit that I think has the most speculation and could either make or break this patch, and that is the Cypher of the first ones. So the small little blue post of information that we have for it is the Autonoma of Zerith Mortis speak in a musical language that is incomprehensible to the mortal races. Team up with a curious Automa sidekick and it's this new progression system to learn the lost language of the progenitors. Delve deeper into the secrets of Zerith Mortis, unlocking an array of new zone activities, daily quests, events, and rewards. Now, unfortunately, this is going to make or break the patch, and that's a lot of pressure to put on one particular piece, but it is. The reason for this is because there are no renown upgrades. Soulbinds aren't being touched, they're not being edited, we're not going to increase anything. So what we have in terms of the Covenant Soulbinds and maybe the conduits we might get a few more conduits in places, but realistically that progression system is now done. And the Cypher is going to be, it's confirmed, the Cypher is the progression for this next patch. So it has a lot to hold up to. But at the same time, that is good because based off the image there's a fair bit of speculation that go into this. First things first though, I kind of wanted to show you guys the language that we'll be looking at. And this is actually a video because they move. So you can see that the runes move, and my speculation based off these runes is that this is going to be the natural time gating. And why do I say that? So if we look at this other picture that they have given us, you can see that this is the Cypher Research Console. And you have various disciplines essentially for your research. Now, this progression system is going to enable you to wear 2 legendaries. It's going to allow you to obviously unlock new quests, rewards, and things like that. Now, the 2 biggest rewards that have been announced so far are the 2 legendaries, as I previously mentioned, and also the ability to craft your tier sets. Now, tier sets have returned, and we will discuss those slightly later and talk about them, because we do also have the images to show. And we're going to get a little bit more in depth about that particular bit in terms of the gearing and how that works. But the double legendary thing specifically is going to be 1 Covenant and 1 normal legendary. So again, for some classes, that's going to be better than others, and may actually force you to pick the Covenant in which your Covenant legendary is best. So for the min-maxers there, you may see chopping and changing based off that. You may not. It depends. Because obviously everything is still subject to change. Blizzard may actually decide that, rather than having it tied to a Covenant and not, you can just have 2 legendaries of your choice. Because there are some classes where their Covenant legendaries are, shall we say, underperforming. But we'll discuss that in terms of the class tier set, because the gearing side of it kind of makes sense to go there. So the speculation then, and why do I think that this has potential? Well, as you can kind of see, you've got Cypher, Metriol, which I assume is material gained, whether or not that's going to be currency, that because that's the transmog icon now, with them having updated it, it wouldn't surprise me if it allows us to start earning appearances from Zerith Mortis, pets, followers, things like that. You then have Altonian. Now, this may be a large punt, but this might actually be alt tokens and things like that, with 9.2 being the final patch. Traditionally, final patches of expansions are usually the place where we start seeing much more leeway to our alts. This may be a case of catch up if you're playing multiple characters or something like that. I don't know. You have Alic, and those icons are scrolls, so I honestly couldn't tell you what that could be. Treblium, Basium, Dealic, and Sopranian, or Sopranian? Yeah. I imagine are zone buffs, perhaps? So the area might be split into 4 zones. And based on this progression, it may be a case of we progress these by 1 week, 2 week, 3 week, 4 week, 5 week, 6 or 7, 8, potentially. Or it could be a progression downwards. So 1 week, 2 week, 3 week, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And the reason I'm saying this is because I imagine that this particular Cypher research console, there'll be a level of time gating to it. And specifically where Cypher is concerned, I imagine that that would be a natural form of time gating. It may be a case of once you get to, say, week 4, week 5, we've only got half the ciphers unlocked in terms of our experience of reading them. It'd be a natural form of time gating, and I imagine would actually be quite beneficial for everyone because it would feel like a natural progression and understanding. End of the day, we are learning a completely new language. Now, on the note of learning the completely new language, we've been told through the developer video and through other sources that we will still hear the musical language. So if you play with game sounds on, you will still hear the sounds, but through speech and dialogue options, you will understand what is being said once we have finally completed the cipher. And so it's something to look forward to, and it's definitely something new within the game. So I'm looking forward to seeing how it pans out. But unfortunately, because it is new and it is the progression system of the patch, it does pretty much have the entirety of this patch going to be held up by its shoulders. So fingers crossed. But I look forward to seeing more on the PTR, and I definitely look forward to seeing how these particular filled out options will work and their costs, because as you can see here in the top right hand corner of the constant research panel, it is the currency. So depending on how fast that currency is accrued will also depend very much on how the rest of this performs. It could be a case of, much like the Valor and Conquest caps that we previously had and will have again in 9.2, I assume, that we can only earn up to, say, 750-ish a week. At which point there will probably, either in the Altonian or Aelix sections, perhaps be a point where you can get more to catch up. So, I don't know, if you're behind and not at the cap for that week, you earn an extra 20% from chests or daily quests or whatever. So, that'll be interesting to see, and kind of a thing for me to look forward to. Again, this language, I imagine that the Secrets Discord and anyone that likes puzzles, there may be, or there could be, a reward of some description if, say, you only uncover half of what the ciphers mean, but you can puzzle out the rest. So I look forward to seeing what certain members of the community do with this once they're given it. Because I know Stitch specifically, in Calamity, very much likes his puzzles. So we might lose him to trying to work out what each of these are once he has like 3 of them. He'll be like, aha, right, that's an A, that's a D, that's an F, right, so that might be a G, and just watch him puzzle it through. It'll be quite nice. So looking forward to that. Now we get to discuss the raid, the Sepulcher of the First Ones. Now, 2 things really to say about the raid. The first is just the little synopsis info that we've got, which is, deep in the Sepulcher of the First Ones lies the key to unlock the Jailer's plans. Gather the power of the First Ones as you pursue Zorval into the Sepulcher and fight through his forces, but first, you must face Anduin and discover a way to resist the Jailer's terrifying domination magic. Now, the reason I read that first is because it's already been announced that when the raid is released, it's going to be released essentially in 2 parts. The first week raid is released, normal and heroic version. Traditionally, we've been able to fight all the bosses, and then come Mythic week, the following week it's released on Mythic and you just crack on, by which point the world first guilds have all played around, tested, and come up with strategies from the heroic version to take into Mythic. However, this time it's going to be a little bit different, because we only get 8 bosses. Anduin is essentially the final boss you will kill week 1, because we will defeat Anduin, then there will be some story arc, And then once we have bested Anduin, the following week, when Mythic opens, the final bosses will be available to be played on normal and heroic difficulty, as well as Mythic, which means that from a World First perspective, and pushing, and any guild that's trying to rank, the final few bosses of the raid tier are going to be completely unknown. So it's a likely tactic that you will actually see guilds rerun heroic as quickly as they can and then go into Mythic. So it's definitely going to be an interesting thing to keep an eye out for. But I am looking forward to seeing how the Sepulcher plays out and how the raid mechanics are. Hopefully they're going to be forgiving for us paladins as wheelchair classes, and hopefully we're not going to be too reliant on something like Cavalier. But we'll see. Not much to say yet on the Sepulcher, unfortunately, but I will definitely keep you guys noted with regards to the raid specifically as we go forward. Because as you guys know, that is going to have a big impact on the channel and how we are going to prepare for 9.2. So keep your eyes out for that. And now finally on to arguably the second most important part of the patch notes, and the one that is probably going to get the most hype from the widest branch of the community, and that is the return of class tier sets. Now, the blue post itself says as follows: harness the power of the first ones by collecting distinctive class armor sets via raids, PvP, or Mythic Plus dungeons. Each set comes with a powerful 2- and 4-piece set bonus that complement your unique abilities. That's right, folks. PvP or Mythic Plus dungeons. This means that tier sets are now attainable outside of raiding. Obviously, raiding will still be the fastest way to attain them. However, due to Cypher of the first ones and the progression we will get there, we will actually be able to take gear we get from PvP and Mythic Plus dungeons and turn it into tier gear. The fact that it is 2 and 4 set bonuses rather than traditional 2, 4, 6, 8 or 2, 4, 6 is because of the double legendary equip that we're going to be having. This does mean that there is likely to be some chop and change, and some legendaries will probably also end up with additional slots added to them to enable you to bounce things around, because I doubt we're going to be in a position where any armor slot can be turned into gear. I think it will be your traditional helm, shoulders, chest piece, cloak, so on and so forth. But with that kind of announcement, let's actually go into the aesthetics and see how they look. So going from left to right across the entirety of the screen, you have Shaman with your wolf-ish headpiece, traditional Shaman mainstay. Rogue, I like the hidden face by the light cowl. It still feels roguish, while at the same time seems almost to be the antithesis of any other rogue armor piece. Very much light forged as it vibes I'm getting, rather than traditional hide in the shadows. So might be a very nice aesthetic for rogues, especially the hood. You then have Shaman. A little bit disappointed. I was expecting the Shaman one to be more primordial or elemental, but there is still the opportunity for, say, the shoulder pads to do something, because obviously we can't see them animated yet. You then have Death Knight, given away by the cowl having a skull depiction inside it. I'll just zoom in. As you can see, the helm looks very much like the Terragru, in that you also have horns coming out of the skull. Be interesting to see how that interacts with some species within the game, such as Tauren. And also, to a degree, any race that has helmet problems. So it'll be interesting to see how a Blood Elf might have their ears poking out where the horn should be. But we'll see. You then have Priest in the usual garb. Can't say that the robe's too dissimilar to things that they already have in the game. I think it is going to be very dependent again on the shoulders and see how the shoulders act. Obviously, this is only one form of, or one shade of the tier sets. It may be a case of we only get the one shade with the return of them, or we may get multiple shades depending on the content. We'll have to see with further announcements. It would be very nice if we were able to get darker shadings of this, because it would definitely then enable more customization, where you'd be able to pick and match sets. But anyway, so you've got Priest, and then you've got Druid, bringing up the right of this first image. Again, quite nice. A little bit more metal and less organic than I thought that it was going to be, but still very nice and kind of fits with the whole theme that is obviously the progenitors. But we'll learn more about what they are during the patch, because I'll be honest, I'm still kind of thinking that they're just similar to early tier Titans, but you know, I could be well off the mark there. Anyway, going into the right hand picture, we have Hunter. Much like the shaman that is based off a wolf, the hunter seems more avian and based off birds, with the helm looking to have a eagle and almost Aztec-like themes. So might be nice to acquire and may fit with some troll themes for you troll hunters out there. You then have Warrior, looking very much like the Juggernaut from the X-Men. I'm expecting that warrior to run through things rather than pull out a weapon. But you know, might be a nice cosmetic, especially if you just want to charge around the place like a happy-go-lucky monkey. Demon Hunter, more spikes. Gonna be interesting to see how that plays out to the Demon Hunter community, because that color scheme is very different to what you guys have for most of your transmogs, I believe. Mage, taking front and center. Hopefully that doesn't mean they're front and center for the DPS. Warlock, God only knows what those pads are doing. I feel like I'm still undecided with orcs. Like, orc warriors, yes, having large shoulder pads looks good, but I'm fairly certain if that warlock was to stand front on between those shoulder pads, that's like 3 characters wide. Does a warlock really need shoulder pads to be that wide? Answers in the comments below, please. And then finally, we have Paladin. Now, for the Paladin concept art, and I don't have a picture to show you guys currently, but I'm fairly certain you can see it if you just look to Wowhead or the public, the press side of WoW, where they release these pictures. The concept art has the shoulders being a lot busier. So again, once we can see the animations and things for them, those shoulders may light up like a Christmas tree, which may be quite nice and is certainly a interesting aesthetic. I think crossing the progenitor gear with the Uldir gear from Baltharazaroth, normal or mythic versions, depending on, again, going back to depending on the colour schemes we get for this armour, will make for a nice mix. Especially the cowl and the traditional T-guard helm with the T-incision on the face. So, quite a nice aesthetic. Be interesting to see how they look once they're in the game. But, again, huge big thing to note, the fact that they can be in Raid, PvP, or Mythic Plus. So everyone's going to have access to this armor. The speed at which you get it, though, will obviously depend on what you do. Those that partake in more or are if you're multidiscipline in terms of how you play the game. So if you do raids in high PvP or raids in high Mythic Plus, then you might increase the speed at which you get these. We don't know for certain yet. But it will be interesting to see how that plays out with the double legendary thing. The set bonuses themselves, just before we wrap this up with the brief other features thing. The complement your unique abilities. That is so open-ended at the moment. It could be that they augment Covenant abilities, with the emphasis on the whole, right, you've got a Covenant legendary, these abilities are now going to augment that legendary to do X, or empower it is maybe like a balancing tuning act, because obviously some classes are at a disadvantage with their Covenant legendaries. Like for instance, Holy Paladins, generally they run Venthyr. Radiant Light, although it gives you a 45-second dash and hollow, it's honestly. The Holy Paladins I've spoken to aren't too impressed about it. Because had we've been given the choice to just have 2 legendaries of your choice, then that would open up a much larger space for personal customization and experimenting between legendaries and trying to get things to play more as to how you'd like than necessarily what's deemed best. For instance, there's a combination of legendaries for Holy Paladin that means that your Light of the Dawn could be a 40-yard range ability and heal like a dump truck. So yeah, unfortunately, current limitations. Alternatively, it could double down on class fantasy abilities. So unique abilities might be poison enhancement for rogues. They could have, I don't know, a primordial poison that increases damage taken, or warriors could have a shatter defenses ability. I don't know, or almost like an old armor pen. But anyway, speculation on tier sets, but they return, so something to look forward to. Wrapping up the final bits then. Other features in Eternity's End. These are fairly minor at the moment and glossed over because, again, this is just an announcement video, really. Mythic Plus in Season 3, so we're going to end up in the kind of PvP Season 3 in the final season of the expansion, so everything will be reset. Tazavesh, on the Node of the Mythic Dungeon, Tazavesh is going to be added, as has been the case with previous expansions. The big mega dungeons, Karazhan, Mechagon, they get split at this point in the expansion and turned into 2 separate dungeons. Now, that does mean that Lower Tazavesh is going to be a hotspot for gearing. Not necessarily for Paladins, because we don't necessarily benefit as much from some of the pieces of gear within Tazavesh. Looking at the post-boss, I say the post-boss, it's in the mailroom. The reason for that is because the trinkets that drop from there were very, very powerful in the progression of the World First Race for Sanctum of Domination, specifically for warriors, rogues, monks, and anything with very, very fast attack speeds, because it was doing a considerable amount of damage. Now, so for the start of next season and the raid tier, if you get a Lower Tazavesh key, you're going to feel like you're a rock star. People are going to want that key, because not only is it good for the DPS, healers and tanks can also benefit from trinkets that drop from that lower area. The upper area, unfortunately, there are going to be particular boss fights that mean that it's going to be very, very challenging, and I imagine that, like most previous dungeons, you're going mecha dungeons that are split, lower half is going to be easier to do on tyrannical weeks because there is considerably more trash. So fortified weeks are going to be somewhat more challenging and less forgiving, because the trash will catch you off guard, and if you're not prepared for it, will cause you some serious problems, whereas the bosses are easier to manage. Alternatively, the upper easy will be easier on fortified weeks because it is predominantly a boss rush. If memory serves with Tazavesh, the last 3-4 bosses are pretty much one after another. So it'll be interesting to see how they divvy up the split in terms of forces and where they deem upper and lower to be, because I imagine that the lower will also cover the part where you're going to Valajar. Not Valajar, but you go to Stormheim and have to fight your way through all the Murlocs, which I imagine is going to be quite fun now that the AoE target cap has been removed and we're with essentially a soft cap, so we do reduce damage, but I still imagine that being very, very difficult on some fortified weeks. Anyway, kind of that's out the way, and the PvP season will also be quite nice. It'll be interesting to see what the PvP sets look like, because I don't imagine they're going to look like the tier sets. I imagine they might have a slightly different cosmetic. So, looking forward to seeing what that is. New mounts, pets, needless to say, that's to be expected. Collectors out there of you rejoice. It was also announced in the video that some of the spiders are going to get to fly. So, arachnophobes, I apologise, but collectors, rejoice. You got some new models to go for. Updates to professions, soulbinds and conduits. Now, there has already been an announcement that soulbinds, at least, are not being updated at all. They have no intentions of changing what we currently have. So the current shape of the soulbinds, the empowerment, and the capstone traits aren't going to change. There may be some tuning passes for them, but that's about it. We're not going to see any new abilities added to Pelagos or Mechanicos or Hermia. Fortunately, we're just stuck with the way that it is, and that's because partially down to the fact that obviously Renown is staying at 80, as I previously mentioned. So there's not going to be any, double empowerments or things like that. The whole Covenant progression has kind of come to a natural end as we go into 9.2 and go to Zerith Mortis. The conduits, though, we may see some new conduits, like we did in 9.1, but if the soulbinds aren't being altered, I don't see us getting much in the way of conduits. They may have an item level increase in terms of the conduits, so rather than having a 252 cap, we may end up with a 262 or something like that kind of cap, just to increase percentages and things like that. At which point, Ret Paladins, fingers crossed that we get Ring and Clarity to 100%, because that will just be hilarious. Like a guaranteed chance every time you Divine Toll that you're going to get more judgments would be lovely. Because I am getting rather annoyed at this point on the occasion when I don't end up with, 3 Holy Power from a Divine Toll on Sylvanas Progress, when she's the only thing to hit. And I'm there like, why am I 1 Holy Power short? I should be Templar's Verdicting at this point. I now have to weave in a Crusader's Strike. This is wasting time. I don't like it. But anyway, that's just a pet peeve of mine. New dancing minigame and Darkmoon Fair. Darkmoon Fair gets an upgrade, which will be nice for those of you that like doing that. Hopefully the dancing minigame will actually give us more tokens, which means the faster acquisition for the mounts and stuff that I don't have, because I'm late to that game. Only recently got exalted with them. It's only taken me nearly 17 years. And then they just say much more. Obviously, we'll hear more as time progresses. Because, and as I did say earlier in the video, I expect us to have the PTR probably by the end of November. Or at least musings of when it's going to go live by the end of November. Because I stand by my... I stand by what I said in my previous video about the fact that we're looking to have 9.2 go live probably around February, March time. And we will then have 10.0, the next expansion, released probably around December. Because Blizzard will try to stick, I think, to a 2-year cycle. Because if they don't, we're going to have problems in terms of longevity of content. But we'll see. In the meantime, though, that has been my review and thoughts on 9.2. Hopefully you guys have liked it, and hopefully the video isn't too jarring to watch after I've edited it. In the meantime, though, I will see you all later, and I hope you have a lovely weekend. Catch you in the next one, folks. Take care.